And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. I am Chris Clark, and thank you for listening. Today, we are actually going to talk a little bit more about the Orlando Brown situation. Why it is such a big deal for Kansas City to get this contract done? We have a little bit over a week, and we're going to talk about the cap implications that the Chiefs will face if they don't sign him, and if they do sign him today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
As I said before, I'm Chris Clark. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. Go like, sub, and hit the notification bell on YouTube if you haven't already. We really appreciate all of those YouTube views. Send us your comments, send us your likes. Give us some feedback on our episodes. We really appreciate that feedback. And also go subscribe on YouTube if you are just listening. We do appreciate those as well. Thank you for making Locked On Chiefs your first listen every day. We do appreciate that. Ryan would appreciate it if you go check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show. He is on that show, and he would appreciate you going and listening to him there. Also have a great Locked On NFL show with a whole bunch of different hosts talking about the news of the day. And actually, I do want to mention this really quick, so let's just get into it here. There was some news on Wednesday, and this is Thursday's show, so I'll get into that. Baker Mayfield was traded from the Cleveland Browns to the Carolina Panthers for a 2024 fifth-round draft pick. That is not anywhere close to the amount of money or the amount of draft capital I thought that the Cleveland Browns would eventually get for Baker Mayfield. But obviously, they didn't have a choice. They had to trade him. They had to get him off the books. It isn't really going to affect Kansas City because Baker was never going to play another snap in Cleveland after the way things had happened anyway. So it won't affect Kansas City in that regard. I don't think that, and the big question that still remains with Cleveland is what is going to happen with Deshaun Watson. I still think that there's a big suspension coming for him. So that's something to watch in the near future. How is that going to affect Kansas City? I don't think it's going to really affect them this year. I have a hard time believing that Watson's going to play, even the first maybe 6 games, maybe even longer in the 2022 season. So I think Cleveland is going to be off to a slow start. I don't think they're going to be a playoff contender this season. But that is definitely going to be something to watch. When we start talking about this Chiefs team and how it's been built and how they are going to continue building it going forward, you start looking at what they're going to do for the salary cap. I also do want to mention really quick, it was announced Chiefs training camp dates are out. You can go find that on Chiefs.com. It starts, I believe, the 27th to 28th is the first day that you can go and you can attend training camp. So be sure to check that out. That is a great time. Ryan and I will both be there. I'm not exactly sure. We haven't figured out the exact dates that we're both going. So we may or may not be there at the same time, but we will both be there covering the Chiefs like you were used to, and glad to be able to go back to that this season. Now, when we start talking about the salary cap, let's just dive into this really quick. This is where Kansas City stands right now as it sits on Wednesday. $14 million in cap space. Now, the big key on this is you sit here and you look at it and you go, okay, where can they make more cap space, although they don't really need it? Where could they make more cap space? The only place that is the biggest thing that stands out to me is going to be if they do something and they get a deal done with Orlando Brown, who is currently slated for $16.662 million against the salary cap in 2022. If they're able to get a deal done with him, I expect that they're going to slice that at least in half, if not even lower, and they're going to lower his cap number. Maybe they will get closer to $20 million in cap space. If they're able to do that, that would be a great deal. Obviously, this is going to change going into the season. That's something to watch and to see how it works over the rest of this, the rest of the offseason. But they are on the top 51, so you have a whole bunch of players that if you were to look at this list, there's a whole bunch of guys. Here's the top 51 cutoff. There's a whole bunch of guys right now that aren't counting against the salary cap. They will continue to not count against the salary cap unless they are on the active roster when the season kicks off. That's going to be another show that we're going to talk about later when we get through the preseason. We have a better idea of who's going to make the roster, who's not. We can give you a better idea as to where the Chiefs are going to stand in the salary cap space. One of the biggest reasons that this is going to make such a big deal is because you start looking at in the future. And if we just look at 2023 really quickly, you can see that Kansas City has about the same amount of cap space in 2023 that they do in 2022. The problem is they only have 43 people under contract for next year. So they have a lot of of deals that are going to have to come off the books. Frank Clark is going to have to come off the books. Obviously, that'll be done. That's $20 million right there. There's a question about Chris Jones. We won't really get into that today, and we probably won't cover that this season, but it is going to be something to look at next offseason. Are they going to do another deal with him and get him signed for a couple more years in Kansas City, or is he going to be a salary cap casualty or somebody that they're going to be looking to trade? But that is going to be something to watch going forward, because it's going to affect how this team is built and what they're able to do going forward. Patrick Mahomes has a lot of weapons at his disposal right now. You have a lot of questions at the wide receiver position. MVS was signed for a 3-year deal. It could be just a 1-year deal depending on how he shakes out. Juju was a 1-year deal. He's got a lot of incentives that are not likely to be earned right now, so it could also affect the cap next year, because if he earns those incentives, it will take off from next year's salary cap, so that's something to watch. Sky Moore is here. McCall Hardman is in a contract year. I can't imagine that Kansas City is going to be bringing him back next year unless he has a super season this year and he becomes a star. But that's also going to be something to watch. It's going to be something to take into account as to how this is all going to put together for the 2022 and then the 2023 season. When we get back, I'm going to dive into the Orlando Browns situation. I'm going to talk about the players that are out there that you need to watch for cap purposes and see where Kansas City needs to get, because don't forget, he has to sign his deal by the 15th of July at 3 p.m. Arrowhead time or 3 p.m. Central time. If he doesn't sign a deal by then, he is not going to be able to sign a long-term contract until after the season is done. And it's going to be a question as to whether or not he's going to report to training camp on time at that point, because he's not going to be under contract of any sort at that point. So that's going to be something to watch. That is July 15th. That is a Saturday. A little bit different this year. Last year was July 15th. It was a Friday. This year it's a Saturday. So something to pay attention to a little bit over a week from right now. And when we get back, I'm going to talk about his contract. I'm going to talk about how it affects Kansas City and how it's going to affect Patrick Mahomes in the future. But before we get there, I want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar. Ryan and I talk about Built Bar all the time. It's because we enjoy their bars. We eat them. They are something that I consume on a regular basis. I like a lot of different flavors. And right now, you absolutely need to check out the Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff. This is one of Ryan and I's favorite flavors, was the Coconut Brownie Chunk. Now they've made it a puff bar, which means it has added marshmallows. You absolutely need to check this out. The Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar flavor you love, in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you too. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. Coconut Brownie Chunk Puffs are only here for a limited time. Go to Build.com right now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going to be going fast because they taste amazing. All Built Bars are made with the collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you too. Delicious coconut, rich sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Get to Built.com right now to order your box of Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Puffs right now. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, so let's hop into this. And we're sitting here, we're looking at the salary cap. This is for 2022, again, $14.3 million right now. I am projecting that they're going to get this down maybe to closer to $8 million if they sign Brown to a long-term contract. So that would get them to over $20 million in cap space, $22 million actually. And if they do that, then that gives them money that they can carry over. Again, like I said before, you have to realize this is partially not real money because the top 51 is the only thing on the roster that's counting right now. Eventually, they will have 53 players plus anybody on PUP, plus anybody on IR, or any other roster designation, plus the practice squad. So they're going to have a lot more players that they have to take into consideration, which are going to eat up some of this money. So that's going to be something to watch here in the coming months. But let's go ahead and jump into the Orlando Browns situation right now. If we look at the left tackle market, here are the tackle contracts that we have right now. You have Trent Williams, who is the highest paid tackle in the NFL right now. Total value of just over $138 million, averaging $23 million a year. You can see he's just beating David Bakhtiari by $10,000 a year. This is by far the most expensive contract for a left tackle in the NFL. Now, he played very good in San Francisco in 2021. Did he play well enough to be the highest paid tackle in the NFL? That's a question mark. I don't know that I would say that he played well enough to get that contract, but he was able to get it from San Francisco. And Kansas City was looking at him. Don't forget that before they traded for Orlando Brown, they were trying to sign him. San Francisco beat him. This is the deal that he ended up signing in San Francisco, 34 years old. That also plays into things because you have to remember Orlando Brown is only 26. He's getting better. He's still ascending, and he's changed his body going into this season. So that's going to be something to watch. How is that going to affect how he's able to play in Kansas City, how he's able to use his kick step, how he's able to handle speed rushers? Because he had the ability to stop power before. If he can figure out how to stop the speed and slow down some of those guys from flying around the edge, that's going to be a huge boon for Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, and this pass offense. So definitely something to watch there. When you start talking about the top tackles in the NFL, you're looking at anywhere over $20 million is going to be what you're going to be looking at when you're spending money and you're trying to sign a left tackle. Tunsil is at $22 million. Ronnie Stanley is at 19.75. You look at Stanley, and I think that's a key. I know Orlando Brown has come out, his uncle at least has come out and said he wants to be the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL. So that would put him at over $23 million a year on average. I'm not sure Kansas City goes there, but I would just about guarantee that his floor is going to be right above Ronnie Stanley's. He played with Stanley for years. He saw what Stanley got paid. He's going to want more than what Stanley got paid. Can you afford to pay him $20 million a year and make it work? I think you can. It's going to be tricky, and there's a lot of different things that are going to play into it. But I think that this is probably the floor right here in looking at a $20 million a year on average deal. Now, the bigger question when it comes to signing a guy like Orlando Brown, especially a 26-year-old, is how many years are you going to sign it for? Kansas City is in a unique position because they have the ability to sign him before he hits one of his best years, probably in his prime. And I think that is going to play into their calculations as to how they're going to pay Brown. They're looking at paying a guy that is 26, likely has at least 5 or 6, if not 7 or 8, maybe even 9 years left playing, depending on if he's able to stay healthy, which he has been able to so far in his NFL career. If he's able to do that, he could be playing well into his 30s and playing, maybe even to what Trent Williams is right now at 34. If he does that, he's in the league for another 8 years. You're looking at having to sign him to another contract after this. So this might not be his last deal. The question is going to be, what does Brown's team want? Are they wanting? They're probably going to be asking for a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal. Kansas City shouldn't be looking to do a 3 or 4-year deal because it is going to keep them from being able to move money around and be able to keep the average per year down if they're going to be giving him a shorter deal. The biggest thing that they can do and where this is going to become a huge key is if you start looking at Trent Williams' contract over the next several seasons, we have a couple of things that really stand out. His salary cap numbers in 2022, it's only $14 million. So as you see in 2021, they only paid him, his cap number was $8 million. So that's about where I'm figuring they're going to try to go to Orlando Brown. Maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe they use more because they have cap space this year and they don't want to push it all forward. But Kansas City is generally looked at as taking contracts and spreading money down the road as far as they can. That's generally what they've done. It'll be interesting to see how this contract plays out because it's going to be a newer situation for Kansas City as they're paying somebody in their prime other than a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Chris Jones. Chris Jones only signed a 3-year contract. That's why it's going to be a big deal for Kansas City to figure out what they're going to do for him in 2023. Now, when we continue looking at the numbers for Trent Williams, only a $14 million cap hit in 2022. If Kansas City can stay at that range for 2023, that's a huge win for this team. Brown is not under contract next year, and you saw as we looked earlier in this show that the Chiefs only have $15 million in cap space. Yes, they have some guys that they can cut. They can make cap space easily. Mahomes is another one. They can trigger a roster bonus and free up a ton of cap space. So I expect that they'll be able to get cap space and it won't be an issue. But Brown's not on that number at all. So his contract, whatever you do with it, is going to count in 2023. And right now, if they kept him at this level, basically Kansas City would have no cap space going into 2023 at all with only 43 players under contract. So there's going to have to be some movement. They're going to have to do some things. Like I said, Frank Clark, Patrick Mahomes, those are two guys that are going to have their contracts adjusted in 2023. But if we continue looking at this, his cap number in 2023 jumps to 26.2, and then almost 27 million in 2024. And then you're looking at 30 million in 2025 and 33 million in 2026. Now, here's the biggest key, and this is something that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about what they're going to do with Orlando Brown. Orlando Brown's a different scenario than Trent Williams because he is so much younger. Brown is 8 years younger than Trent Williams is right now. He is going to be, 7 years younger than when Trent Williams signed his contract. So that's something that Kansas City is going to take into account. But you start looking at how they structured this, and he doesn't have any guaranteed money past 2023 in his contract. So really, the last 3 years are fluff. They're what gets him the APY that he wanted. So when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about the cash flow that we have right now for Trent Williams and what Kansas City could really do and make sense, and what they could use to make sense for Orlando Brown in 2022 to sign to an extension. All right. So now we're sitting here and we're continuing to look at Trent Williams' contract just a little bit. So if you look past 2024, there's nothing on the books that's guaranteed. This is all probably going to go away. His signing bonus that he signed is going to be in here in this prorated roster bonus. So he signed a huge deal, had a $30 million signing bonus that's spread out over 5 years, which means if they cut him in 2024, they'll still have $12 million in dead cap space. Now, Brown is in a similar scenario. I think that he's going to be looking for somewhere around probably $40 million in a signing bonus. That would count 8 across 5 years. Kansas City could do a couple of different things. They were very creative with the way they used Patrick Mahomes' contract. I wonder if they're going to try to be creative with Orlando Brown's contract, because everything that we've seen from Kansas City is that they want to keep him here on a long-term basis. And if that is truly the case, then maybe they feel like they could use a roster bonus situation in 2023, which would allow them to bring his number way down if they wanted to, and still give him a good signing bonus in 2022 and keep a little bit more salary cap space next year to be able to continue to contend. Obviously, you're going to have to pay for that down the road, but that's something to watch if they do that. And I'm very curious to see what Orlando Brown gets when his contract comes out. Trent Williams' deal was 6 years, $138 million. Just over $23 million a year on average. I think Orlando Brown is probably going to be closer to 20. I would expect that Kansas City is wanting to keep it around 21. And if that is the case, then you're looking at a scenario of, if it's 6 years, you're at $120 million. If it's 5 years, you're closer to $125 million, $126 million for $21 million a year. If it's 5 years, you're looking at around 105. I think that's about where Kansas City is going to be trying to get this contract. I don't think that they want to go to the $23 million a year annually. But if they were to go that route and they wanted to make him the highest paid tackle in the NFL, they definitely could. And the easiest way to do that is to throw in things in here in years, in the last 2 or 3 years of the contract, that have huge cap numbers and huge salaries that are never going to get hit. And then they have a deal down the road where they're going to have to make a decision. Okay, we had Orlando Brown for, let's say, 3 years for $60 million. Right now, he's at 16.5. That, the franchise tag is not a good scenario for the player in this scenario, which is kind of surprising. It is a great scenario for the Chiefs because they're going to be paying him more than 16.6 this year. I just about guarantee it. At least when you take into account the signing bonus and how all that's going to play out. But you sit here and you look at it, and it's a question of, okay, can we give him a salary of $20 million? Look at this. In 2024, Trent Williams has $20 million. In 2025, it's 22.5. In 2026, the way they got his number to be over Bakhtiari is a number he's never going to see. He's never going to be playing at 38, would be my guess to begin with. Although I don't want to say that about Trent Williams because I never thought he'd be playing as well as he is at 34. But he's never going to see the $32 million. And that's the key. If they want to make this a big deal with Brown and he wants to be the highest paid, they can. If that is what he is after, you can absolutely do that. You can add base year salaries in years 4 and 5 or 5 and 6 or whatever it is way down the road that he's never going to hit, which would get his APY up. Players really care about those APYs. So if is that going to be something that Brown's going to really be after, or is he really going to be after what am I actually going to make from this contract? Because if he's after what he's going to make from the contract, I think Kansas City stays around 20 to 21 million APY. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't want to pay Brown that. The reality is you have one of the better left tackles in the NFL. You don't want to let him get away. He's 26 years old, and you want him to be able to continue to grow with Patrick Mahomes. I think he played a lot better at the end of the season than he played early on, and I think he's going to be even better this year because of what he was able to do with his body and lose about 20 pounds this offseason. He's still working on his footwork. He went from a running offense to a passing offense in the span of an offseason last year. He was not able to get his body right for it. I think that he looks like he has been working on that this year. I think he's going to be in a much better position to be able to do so. If I was to guess, I would bet that his contract is going to be 5 or 6 years, and it's going to be around $21 million a year APY, unless he really wants to be the highest paid player. And then you look at years 4, 5, 6 as being huge years in contract. Maybe you give him a year 5 that's 25 million. Maybe you give him a year 6 that's 35 million. It doesn't really matter because they're never going to get to that money. And the money that is really going to be a big deal for Kansas City is what are they guaranteeing him? What are they paying him in salary every year after they guarantee him whatever his signing bonus is, which I still think is going to be between $30 and $40 million. There's going to be a little bit of adjustment from last year, and with inflation, you have to think it's going to be probably a little bit higher, especially considering Brown is such a young player. I do think that plays into it as well. And he hasn't really had a veteran contract yet, so I think that's also going to play into how he wants to have this deal done. He wants more in a signing bonus, and maybe he's willing to take less on the back end in a salary or something like that. So those are the things I'm watching for in this contract. Again, it needs to be done a little bit over a week from today. It needs to be done July 15th. If they sign him to a contract, it has to be done that date, or he will be playing on the franchise tag. And then your guess is as good as mine when it comes to when he is going to show up and participate in training camp and when he's going to be there for the Chiefs. Definitely going to be something to watch. I'm really excited to see how this contract plays out. I will give all the details and a breakdown of the contract once we get that information, because I do think it's going to get done, as Matt and Brian have talked about yesterday. I do think it'll get done. I'm just curious, what's the structure? How's he getting paid? How much is his signing bonus? And how's it going to affect Kansas City long term when it comes to the cap? Because that is going to affect how they're able to build this team and how they're going to be able to compete for years to come. So be sure to keep it tuned here. We will have that coverage for you. We are also, like I said, going to have a lot of coverage for you for training camp coming up in the coming weeks once that gets kicked off at the end of July. Thank you for listening today to Locked On Chiefs. We really appreciate it. Again, go like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on YouTube. Go check us out on iTunes. Appreciate that as well. You can leave us reviews there as well. And we will talk to you tomorrow.